Can you share who you are, what you do, and how you help people?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for having me. My name's Karen Roberts. I'm the CEO of Podcast Profits Limited. I'm a podcaster for one, but I also have a podcast network. So my passion is really helping coaches and experts design, create, launch, grow their podcast and really use it to turn it into a sales machine, use it as the vehicle to drive their business because it's fun.
I love what you do. Thank you so much. And I agree. Yes, podcasting is fun. Doing this is probably the most fun thing out of my business. Just having conversations with interesting people and meeting people from all over the world. Like, I think we're an ocean apart, aren't we?
We're definitely an ocean, or we're definitely a very large ocean apart. And
Yeah.
this is the beauty. This is the beauty. I've got to meet the most amazing people in the last nearly 4 years that I would never have met before. I would never have met you before, Stacie. I think we first met about a year ago.
Yep.
So, yes, from my experience, it's definitely the most fun part of the business.
Love it. I know that there are people listening and watching, and some of them have started their podcast. Some of them are thinking about starting a podcast, but I guess where both of those two types of people meet is that they're not really leveraging their
Oh,
podcast. So
mhm.
I know that you have quite a journey that actually ties into how you help people. Like, where do you want to start with this?
When I started, I had no idea, no clue what I was doing. I had put on a summit, an online summit at the beginning of lockdown, not for profit, just to try and lift people's spirits. Can you remember that awful time? And I had 20 other coaches from a physical, mental, or spiritual perspective. And off the back of doing that, I was just offered a radio show, a weekly radio show. And I just said yes. I didn't know why, didn't know what for. I just knew that I just loved interviewing people because I'm genuinely interested into as to why they're doing, what their journey was. So when you came on as a guest, it was called A Coffee with Karen, a cup of positivity with just a sprinkling of woo woo. So I thought it was a fun name because I was interviewing coaches and therapists from the conventional to the more woo woo, but there was no alignment with what I was doing. Mind you, at the beginning, I didn't know what I was going to do. I really wasn't getting an ROI, but I had made a commitment to show up. And I really, truly believe that 99% of this is making a commitment to show up. But, as you said earlier, people just think that all they got to do is talk into the mic. And they come from such a genuine, really wanting to serve. So they want to just give info and help. However, that isn't what's going to drive your business. And that's, I suppose, what I found out the hard way because about a year ago, I was sat in my flat. It was hot, right? It was summer, and I have the blinds down to block the sun out so the flat doesn't get too hot, right? So that makes you feel a little bit closed in, and it can be a lonely place, can't it, behind your computer all day? And I heard a ding notification, and it was an email from a host because I have a podcast network saying that they're not renewing. And I was just like, oh, my heart sank. I was just like, oh, I'm failing. I had in a total up to that point 14 podcast show hosts give up. So the stats that we are told, I know for a fact, are 100% correct. 90% of podcasters don't make it past 3 episodes. And then out of the 10% that do, 90% of those don't make it past 20. And yeah, I knew that. And I was going to be bankrupt by the end of the year if I didn't do something drastic. And I had to really look at what we were doing. I had to bring my podcast in alignment with what it is we were doing, which is helping people start and actually give them more support and more of a strategy and a process to actually launch their podcast in the right way, which I hadn't when I began. Hindsight's a wonderful thing, right? We know just through failing forward, right? We just keep going and keep going. And then I can look back and go, this is what I should have done from the beginning. And so that really, really hit me because, like I said, I really, really enjoy this. And I think for me personally, I was very lucky that I was offered a weekly radio show. So as entrepreneurs, when we come away from the employee sector, if you like, we lose accountability. When you do go for a job, when you're going in every day to your job, you know exactly what's expected of you. You get the job done. You don't procrastinate about what to do that day. You're given a list of things to do that day and you just get on and do it. And then we all become entrepreneurs and we don't have that. We've got to figure it out ourselves. And then fear of judgment or fear of failure can stop us from actually taking action on the things that we need to do that we probably would have done if we were in a job, right? And because
Absolutely.
I had to, it wasn't like there was no choice about it. I had to submit a 60-minute show every week to the radio. That was my accountability. So I think I got complacent. I think because I'd done that for, it was over a year. It was nearly 2 years, I think. I was in the habit of it. There was no question about it. Have I got a show for this week? I've got to have a show. So I think that helped me. And I didn't realize it. We can get complacent, right? And so you can think, well, why aren't you? Why haven't you started your podcast? Why haven't you submitted another show? But because I maybe started with it a different way of doing it, so that by the time I just had my podcast, it was habitual. I didn't have to worry about what to say, worry about how to plan. I was in the habit of doing it and it was easy. So I think for me, that's what I needed to change then. I had to realize that somebody coming in that wants to start a podcast, they don't know what they don't know. And then when they start to realize that there's a little bit more to it than speaking into a mic, they get overwhelmed or confused, and overwhelm and confusion, nothing gets done. So we had to just completely change the way we did everything to help people hit the ground running so they become one of the stats, I suppose.
And it's remarkable how it's led you to helping people in the way that you do because of those stats, and also because of you making these decisions that you had no idea, would affect you down the line. But there's a gift in that, isn't it? Because you can help people avoid those mistakes. You were able to be put in a supportive network, basically, to help you stay accountable. When we go from our corporate career or job and, we do everything we're told, but then when it comes to our business, like all that goes out the window when you're starting. Of course, you're going to learn after a while that you have to have discipline. And it's very important to have a supportive network of people that understand what you're building. So I really appreciate your journey because it's taught you a lot of lessons, and you're able to share this with others and the people that are listening and watching right now, especially those who started a podcast and, let it fall to the wayside instead of looking at it as a piece of their business puzzle, a part of their marketing and sales funnel. I know that a lot of people look at a podcast and think that it's automatically going to bring in clients or customers. The only way that's going to happen is if you have a particular strategy and everything that you're doing is intentional. Nothing is the most successful podcast out there that aren't celebrities, because I know we were talking about that earlier before hitting record, like just us small business owners, the ones that are successful, there's a intention behind it. It's not like they just hit record and off they went. No, there was a lot of intention behind it. So Karen, I would love for you to talk about, like, for those that are wanting to leverage their podcast as a way to not only make a positive impact, but also to use it as a way to generate leads, to make more sales, to attract clients and customers. What are some steps that people need to take to turn their podcast listeners into leads or to clients or customers?
Well, I think the first thing was not making the mistake that I did when I started. So my podcast is now called Podcast Profits Unleashed Podcast, which, guess what my website is? podcastprofitsunleashed.com. My workshop, podcastprofitsunleashed.com/what. Everything is in alignment. You know, we want to come up with a clever name. Well, if you want to use it to drive business, and if you have a core offer, well, what is your core offer called? To the listener, it's crystal clear what it is you do so that it's all on brand. Everything is now on brand. Nobody could be confused as to what it is I do. That's the first thing I think is simplify. Don't try to be clever because you're not a celeb, right? If you've got a massive, massive following, maybe you can do all these fancy things. But if you're starting out and you want to use it to drive business and sales into your business, everything needs to be in alignment. Then it's about creating the right kind of content that's going to attract or even create your ideal client. As we said earlier, that you don't know what you don't know. So if you're creating the right content for each podcast episode, and it is very well thought out and there is a flow to it, it's not just giving info because we think, well, okay, I thought that I needed to just give information, but information tells, stories sell. So the way you can construct your whole podcast structure, as it were, whether that's interviewing guests, whether that's interviewing experts in your niche, whether that's interviewing past clients, current clients, or solo episodes, even the solo episodes, it's not just about teaching. There needs to be something a little bit more to be able to take the listener, and I suppose it's putting yourself in the listener's mindset to bring them on a journey. You get the opportunity every episode to just show up as your authentic self. I mean, I can be a little bit all over the place, and because I get really passionate and really excited about, but that's me. And I think that is the beauty. You're not trying to be somebody else. You get to show up as you in your way, speak from the heart. It's not scripted. Just because it's not scripted, it doesn't mean it's not planned. And find a way to bring the listeners on a journey, really. And if you can clearly demonstrate how you help the listener achieve a specific result, because that's what you're doing with your core offer. If you're a coach, you need to articulate how you help XYZ person, whoever your target audience is, achieve XYZ result. What is the transformation that you offer, not the things that you do? Nobody wants to know the details. And if you can articulate that clearly in each podcast episode, it's almost an opportunity to sell without selling, because it's about bringing the listener in so that because it's not about you, it's about the listener, they come to the conclusion themselves that you are the right fit for them. And this is, I think, what the beauty of podcasting, because people get to see the real you. And especially nowadays with the rise of AI, anybody, they could have no experience, they could create a post, they could write an email, they could even create a whole course, not even using their own voice or using AI. And I truly believe the more that happens, the more people will want the real, raw connection. They want to see people not reading from a script, not, just regurgitating something from that AI ChatGPT has just written out. And I think you can tell that through podcasting. And I think this is why, if you're a coach or an expert, the time is now to jump in, because this is your opportunity to just showcase yourself, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? It's never going to be, I am far from perfect, but I speak from the heart. And I think that comes across. And that's all about building up the know, like, and trust factor that we hear about so often.
Yes, I agree with you. And thank you for, breaking that down. First one about, just making sure everything is aligned, your brand. Everything of mine is Unleash Your Ambition, or my podcast, my collective. That way it's across the board. People make that brand memorable, and the same thing with your brand. So I think that's very important. And it's something that a lot of people don't think of. I know I didn't for my first podcast back in 2013. Is Reach Your Next Level of Greatness. Great podcast name, a little too long, but was not on brand. But of course, I didn't know what I didn't know. And those are the beautiful lessons in this whole business journey, of course. I love how you brought up, Karen, about AI and how people are using them. And there's a right way to use them, and there's a way to use them that really doesn't benefit you. It actually does the opposite. So I love that you're bringing up a podcast gives people an opportunity to just to know you as a person. And I love that you shared, don't just teach. We have stories, or we can share the stories of others and how people come on the podcast. That's what makes it interesting, because I want to, whenever I decide on who I want to work with or who I want to buy from, I want to know who that person is, not just like what they do, but just who they are as a person. I like their quirkiness. I find their journey interesting. They're human. I think that's the thing about social media that I don't like, is that people are only really sharing their highlight reels most of the time. So that gives a very false perspective about what it looks like to run a business, what it looks like to have a happy marriage, what it looks like to be wealthy, whatever it is, whatever anybody's putting out there. And I'm not saying it's intentional, but maybe some of it is. It doesn't help us. Like, it makes us think like, oh, what's wrong with me? No, there's
Yes.
nothing wrong. They're just not sharing everything. And what I love what you said was like about sharing the good, the bad, the ugly. I love sharing my journey. I love sharing my mistakes, because I don't want people to have to make those mistakes. Like, my hope is anybody that I work with, and I know it's the same thing with you, because that's why you're so passionate about helping people with their podcast, is not to repeat the same mistakes, and also give them an environment to thrive in. And I think that is just so important, that we have to make sure that the content that we're sharing, it's humanizing us. One of my coaches, I used to be kind of intimidated by her until she started really showing who she was, because before she really wasn't. But I was like, oh, she's just a human. This is something that holds people back from getting help, is that they see someone successful or pursuing something that they want to pursue, and they're afraid to reach out. They're not approachable.
And they're too far ahead. They think they're too
Yeah.
far ahead, so I can't do it. Which is
Yeah.
why stories, even if you are hugely successful, coming on the show, and I'd have guests on and they want to just talk about me, 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 me. I've got this, that XYZ qualification, and I've been doing this. Nobody cares. What they want to hear is that moment in time when you were possibly at your most vulnerable, and what happened for you to even have the aha moment to make a change, because that's what will draw the listeners in, because they might feel, well, oh, you did it then, so maybe I can too. So again, it's always going back to put yourself in the position of the listener, rather than I'm this, I'm that, I've got this and I've got that. Nobody cares. And I think that's what's going wrong in social media. They're trying to put up this stuff, but that's not going to connect with the listener, because they're going to think, well, yeah, but I'm in this place and you're that place and I can't see a way to get there. Whereas if you bring yourself back to where you were in that place, they're going to resonate more with it. And I think that's what's going wrong, I suppose, with social media.
Yeah, I can definitely agree. And
Only
I'm glad that you.
a personal opinion, and I'm
No,
sure there are other opinions.
it's actually an opinion that I agree with, because if somebody's not approachable, we might not have to be relatable, maybe on some things, but not everything, of course. But if they're not approachable and they're just shouting from the rooftops about how great I am, I did all this and that, it's like you just really put an invisible wall between
Yes.
you and the people that you could definitely help. So I think podcasting definitely breaks that wall. And it gives people an opportunity, yes, to know like who you are, your journey. You have so many stories. Like, we have so many stories, even if we might not think that they're interesting or helpful. I think it's always good to just share it. You just never know how it's going to impact somebody's life. But I definitely want you back on the podcast, because there's so much more that we can go into, Karen. But in the meantime, where can people connect with you outside of the podcast?
What I want to do is help coaches and experts, obviously. I do have it's a free course. It's just a mini course, and it'll take you through the things to think about to create your blueprint, because there's not a one size fits all. And every coach or expert, they got a different niche and a different, so there's not just one thing, but it will just give you sort of an outline of the things that you want to think about. Because if you can create your podcast with the end in mind, As I said, not as I started. If you build it with the end in mind, it will help you get clarity, because clarity is, because it's an intangible, it's underestimated. Like I said earlier, when there's confusion and overwhelm, nothing will get done. And the amount of people that say to me they really want to start a podcast, and it'll take them months. I mean, 6 months to get round to doing it. It's like, just get clear. You don't have to have everything ready. But when you have this clarity on the steps, on the next steps, it will make it so much easier. So yeah, I would love to invite your listeners. So that's a freebie. So that's podcastprofitsunleashed.com/free, and get instant access to it. It's a very short video course. Yeah, I'm on Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever Karen Roberts Coaching. It's normally under Karen Roberts Coaching.
I'll make sure that I have all of that information in the show notes. If you're watching this, it should be below the description, wherever you're watching the video. And Karen, thank you so much for being here. So final words of wisdom for the person who started a podcast and put it on the back burner and they are just resisting coming back. What would you like to share with them?
Just get back on it now. Now is the time. I saw some stats that I think 50% of 18 to 35-year-olds in the US watch podcast or listen to podcasts as opposed to TV. I mean, it's only going to go in one direction. So the time to start is now. And overall, with anything, going back to that, 99% of it is making a commitment to show up. It doesn't have to be really long. Yes, I started with a 60-minute one. That was crazy now. When I think back, I don't do 60 minutes anymore, but you can even do 10 minutes. Just make a commitment. You can make it really, really simple, but the key is to just keep going. The algorithm likes you if you show up every single week and offer something. And the thing is like with social media, people are so obsessed with looking at the stats. They're not getting engagement. They're not getting, nobody cares. They're still watching. The beauty with a podcast is the ones that don't like you are not listening. So guess what? You get to show up and serve those that do. It's a win-win.